You doing this for checks? Yeah, they haven't been at a lot of things. There was an open house somewhere today. The Sullivan Law was a good story. They were there, and then there's something else on the post. And yesterday, there's something else I didn't hear. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. We've run a combo, but I got that. There's also something else happening. Yeah, so are you doing more work for them on the weekend? They should just give you a truck, and I don't know why they can't. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, they're worried about me. I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I don't know, it's not white balance. It's so white. Because it's so dark.
No, there's Gary right there.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
It's a really nice shot.
He's got far too many eyes, but last week I here
Wow, no. I'm always a member of the food services board, right?
Front and center.
I haven't done my training yet, so thanks for helping me out there.
I haven't done mine yet. I didn't start it the first time. I was thinking like, because I look at the videos, I go an hour and a half and I don't see much feedback. I was sitting like this.
If you're a fast reader, you can do it in 6.
No, 8 to 9.
Maybe you can white balance here.
Yeah, and at the end, like they'll say, the first watch was 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I didn't have the last one, but they'll
chair?
They did it for 2 hours and 40 minutes. They'll make sure that you watch
There he is.
after every module.
What's his, is he a board member?
Yeah, module there's a test and you have to get 80%.
Hey, I recognize him.
And really easy to reach.
Mary's the
So tell
chair.
you all the answers.
Police Service Board, PSB? Perfect, thanks. You're doing a little overtime today.
Yeah.
I had sharp feet last year.
Yeah, I think it's good.
I think you're sitting in the other room. I had the other, who's the guy, Harnett and something, you were in there, it's good.
So it took me, I think, 5.5 hours to do the first 3, but I was a little slower. And then on the last one, that was the big thing for China. I was like, okay, and I think I whipped it off in
Hey, Gary.
2 hours.
At some point, we are going to be audited because then it'll probably do that things that the administration is going to download them on right now. They've been zone advisors. And so, I mean, we will be audited. They're compliant with all this. So I'll have to be able to just pull it my file and check.
How you doing, Drew?
Good. How are you tonight?
Good. I was hoping Gary would join the fray here. You guys chatting a bit, or want to get? You're wearing a green shirt. Yeah.
No, not really.
So your master's jacket? Or?
No.
No, he's good.
Gary's
Bit of the contrast, right?
We'll have a little chat about football. Football games too. It's good that we really speak about
Jets against the Patriots.
we got past spring break then.
My team are the Bills. I like the Bills.
Saints are like doing really well.
Team of the Cowboys.
I'm surprised with
They
that.
had like the last 2 years.
True, my God, gentlemen.
Steve Girardi.
Steve, you're a board member? GIR? Okay. Gary, that's the last thing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, small team. Space. And I can't believe you can't get that.
Just in your chair. Mary
We're
Alphabet.
gonna start.
Can I buy vowels? Okay.
Please.
Just want to check the sound. Can everybody hear me in the back of the room? Fantastic, thank you. I see Alex, thanks for your hands up there, Alex. Thanks for that show earlier. So, thank you all for joining us here tonight. Before we get started, I do want to offer a land acknowledgement. This was written by the chief of the Treaty 3 Police Service, somebody who I know well, and Indigenous leader within our policing community. So I'll just start by acknowledging that we live and work on the ancestral and traditional territories of many First Nations, Métis and Inuit. Footsteps have marked these lands for generations. We're grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers, elders who are still with us today, and for those who've gone before us. We recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. We're live streaming tonight's presentation, and you can find it on Peterborough YouTube channel when we're all said and done. So we do have a variety of people in the room here tonight, including our police service board members who are peppered throughout the room, but predominantly up here it seems. My bosses are right in front of me, and of course our senior leadership team, so anybody dressed in white with a vest on, I'm sure that's easy to identify. Those are our senior police leaders, and then those with black blazers and crest of the police service are our senior civilian managers. And we have others here from the police service who are joining us who are from our rank and file and our civilian staff. So I do thank everybody for taking the time here tonight. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to apologize for that, just this much, because I do believe it's important to give you as much information as possible, to give you as transparent a look at what's happening in this city, what's happening with your tax dollars, what we've done with last year's tax dollars, and what we intend to do with next year's. I think that's very important. We want to go through some of these quickly. Where we have information on our website, or you can find that another way, I'll point you to that so I don't take an inordinate amount of time explaining those slides. And we'll leave some time for some questions and answers. I do know when you came in there was a table. If you had questions, you can write them on a card. They'll be brought up to me so that I try and address them through the course of the presentation, or I can get to them at the end of the night. And for anybody who took the time to write that, thank you very much. That will certainly help things speed. Okay. So we're going to go a little bit over the demographics here in our city, and we police a population of just over 100,000 people. That includes the city of Peterborough, and of course our contract policing in Lakefield and Cavan Monaghan. And I say contract because that's important. Cavan Monaghan and Lakefield pay for their policing over and above what is dealt with here with tax dollars in the city of Peterborough. The officers they have are paid for by residents in those areas. If they were not contracted, those officers would not be employees of the Peterborough Police Service. There are benefits to us for having that, because when something happens here, we can bring those extra officers into the city. Conversely, when something big happens there, we will send officers there. Fortunately, neither one of those things happens very frequently, but we do keep tabs on that. So that's an important thing for us to know. We know with a population of 100,000, we're pretty much a nice representation with Statistics Canada data, especially when they talk about police to population ratios, it's always based on 100,000. When they talk about crime rates, always based on 100,000. We're nicely represented this way. However, we police far more than 100,000. As you will see here, we police just over 7,500 students that join us from Fleming College. We police another 15,000 students who join us from Trent University. We know that the county brings in has a population of approximately 150,000 people. We don't police 150,000 people from the county, but we do know that they come into services in this city. And then for the tourism site, and this part took me, but I've had a few people explain it to me now, we have approximately 3 million visitors to this city and surrounding area every single year. That's enough people coming into our area every single year. Our budget is based on the 100,000. Our engagement is based on those other numbers as well. The vast majority of people, whether they're residents here or they're visitors here, never come into contact with the police. But it's important to put that into context in terms of the number of people that we're addressing. So last year we asked and we received, thanks to the support of City Council and my board, 15.3% of an increase on our police budget. That was significant. That was after more than a decade of some fairly austere years of budgeting here in the city with regard to police. We were held to approximately 3%, with the exception of the 2 previous years prior to last year. One was around 3.5% and one was 4%. That's important to note because those 3% increases were not keeping up with increased inflation and negotiated salary. And we're not covering those costs, you're shrinking your organization. Because they're mandatory costs, they're unavoidable costs. So that money has to come from somewhere. So we saw an actual contraction of what this service could do. And we're in a bit of a catch-up phase now. And it hurts, because when you wait and you put everything off, this is what we end up with. However, I did make some promises of things we would do with that 15.3%, and we've been able to deliver on that. In 2024, put this together by this money, it's just the beginning, because we're building on that momentum. So what are some successful things we were able to do and continue to do? Well, you will know, and I know some people won't appreciate this, but others will, we implemented the Safer Public Spaces Initiative. This started actually in the end of 2023, October 5th to be exact, where we took and then we said enough. We have a community that's expressing concern to the police do not feel safe in their own community. And our community requires us to, my job requires us to police the entire community. And the concern was the proliferation of open-air illicit drug use on our playgrounds, in our parks, in front of our businesses, and on our bus shelters. And so we put in an initiative called Safer Public Spaces. There are 2 police services in Canada that have come out and said, this is how we're going to approach this. Zero tolerance. Not allowed in those locations. Edmonton Police did this in September of last year, and I announced it here in October of last year. You'll now know, of course, the entire province of British Columbia has taken this approach as well. In fact, they introduced legislation on October 5th to say introduce this. It was challenged in the courts, and the federal government repealed their exemption for Section 56 and allowed them to be able to do some things around enforcing the zero tolerance for the same types of behaviors that we're enforcing here. It's not punitive in that we don't arrest people who don't need to be arrested. In fact, if you're doing drugs in those places, parks, playgrounds, bus shelters in front of our businesses, you will be given the opportunity to move along. You'll be told, we have a consumption and treatment site, move it along, it's not allowed here, go somewhere, go home, do it somewhere else. There will be some who say they have no home. Then go to the consumption site if that's where it's appropriate to go. But the fact of the matter is, our business owners and our people who use our streets need to feel safe. So, we had night arrests. Those are all as a result of people who are wanted for other things. Right? So this isn't about us arresting people who are doing drugs. This is saying, hey, we recognize, we are compassionate, we know that people are afflicted with an addiction, and it's move on to the location that has been approved for you to do that, go there. And so my officers have been empowered to make sure that they stop and they do that. Now, one of the things is we respond to citizens who ask us, what do you do if I see something? So since last year, we've had 497 of these calls. 440 of those have been in direct response to a community member calling in to our dispatch to say, doing drugs in this location, and they need to move on. So when I hear people say, I call the cops and they never show up, the cops don't do anything, that tells me at least 497 calls, 440 of them are the cops showing up and doing something in direct response to somebody asking for us to do something. That's important. Not all. We can't possibly get to everything. That's a bigger societal issue, but we're going to do our part to help keep the streets safe. There's an important list, and that is that the PPSC, so that's our federal prosecutors who prosecute drug crimes, they put out a directive several years ago that said we're not going to charge people who have, or we're not going to prosecute people who have simple possession of a controlled substance. So our hands are effectively tied. If I arrest them and I send them to court, they're not going to be prosecuted. So what are we going to do with them? Well, we're going to at least make sure everybody else is safe, and we send them to a location where they too can use and be safe. And we provide them with information how they can get to other resources if that's not available to them. We track where it's happening in the city, probably not a surprise, in the map here, and the map's on your seat, which is what you see replicated here. The red in the center, that is the center. We'll call that the heart of the city. That's our Area 1 that you'll hear me refer to, and that's our downtown core. So yes, the vast majority is in the downtown core. However, it is spread throughout the city, and we will continue to do this throughout the city. This is step 1 in public safety. Step 2 was the introduction of Community First. Community First is a, as you will know from our local media here, that is the low dollar value, high frequency, maximum aggravation types of crimes. Those are the property crimes, the shoplifting, those low crimes that happen that make your life miserable, that quite frankly are fairly low in terms of policing response priorities. Because we triage how and when we respond to crime. And if somebody's life's in danger, that is our #1 response. If your car was rifled through, either it's because the door was unlocked, somebody saw some sunglasses, or they saw cash, and they went through that, that's a low priority. But we put officers to doing nothing but that. And since it started January 9th, this group of officers has arrested 287 people in relation to these types of crimes. Probably they never have been brought before the courts otherwise. As a result, they've returned over $1,000 in property. Now keep in mind, these are small items in many, many cases. And that doesn't account for the costs associated to the 100 shopping carts. Now, the shopping carts often get stickers, but you know what? Our business owners, they don't deserve to be victims of crime either. And when they pass that cost along to you, it never reverses. And when those shopping carts can cost $400 to $1,000, that's a big hit that's hitting our local businesses. And when our downtown businesses say, or our other businesses say, I can't afford this, what are you doing? We have to do something. And including and returning bicycles when we can get to those as well. So Community First has made a significant impact, and I call it a 1-2 punch around public safety in our community. However, what are they dealing with? Well, the vast majority is shoplifting, theft, property-related crimes, and of course, people who are wanted. And why are they wanted? Because they've done this before, and we've had a warrant for arrest, and we've been able to arrest them and bring them before the courts for that. This is an important statistic. And like the safer public spaces, the vast majority, 67.7% of our responses is because somebody called us, hey, this is what's happened. And I know that the staff sergeant who runs that unit is here today, And really a large part of the success is as a result of his dedication to this working and working with our community partners and a small team of 4 officers who've done a fantastic job, dedicated to ensuring that the community feels that they are being heard and that these are being responded to. So what are our core police responsibilities? This is important to know, because we have a new police, right? The Community Safety and Policing Act, it replaced the Police Services Act. Down the left here, that's pretty much the standard: crime prevention, law enforcement, maintaining public emergency response, providing assistance to victims, and the catch-all any other prescribed functions. What it doesn't say is who deals with the non-criminal matters. Is that a police response? The police often say, no, it's not. The fact of the matter is, there is nobody else to do that work. 2 days ago, I'm sitting in my office looking at calls for service that are waiting to be responded to. And I see one in there about a raccoon. And a caller is called in about a raccoon whose eyes are bulging out, she's trapped it in a tote, and she's asking the police to come because it might have rabies. And I look and I ask my dispatch supervisor, why are we having this call? Why are we responding to this? This is not a police matter. Can't animal services deal with this? She said, no, because they don't deal with wildlife. I said, does anybody deal with this? Yeah, the police deal with this. Those are the types of things we get called to. On that same day, I had another call sitting there, and I printed them off here, where we had a young woman who wanted us to reach her and connect to her mother so that her grandma would call her, because she hasn't been able to get in touch with her grandma, and she wants the police to go over and see her grandma so that she can get in touch with her. These are the kinds of calls that the police get on a daily basis.
That's a wellness.
You would think so, but in fact it wasn't, because I happened to have the opportunity through. It didn't come in as a wellness check, and it's not what she was asking for. She wanted grandma to call her. She wasn't worried about whether grandma was alive or well. She just wanted grandma to call her because she had to call her. So I get the opportunity to look at the back end of all those calls, and that's where I can say, one, it wasn't. It's not disingenuous. I got to tell you, it truly isn't. Section 14 and Section 19 agreements. These pieces here are going to drive us into expense, because the new Police Act requires us to have memorandums of understanding with other police agencies to provide services that this organization cannot. And there will be a cost recovery. There will be memorandums that we are going to have with other agencies. Peterborough Police do not provide policing to the waterways in and around this city. Other agencies do that. We are going to have agreements, recovery for that. It's going to cost money. Then there's the rest here around training, equipment, new oversight, and new reporting. And I have the slides here around training. I can tell you that the new Police Act requires significant increases in training for police. Special constables, those are your prisoner people who watch the prisoners, are going to require 5 weeks of training just to be able to do that job. They're going to get training on Compulsory Automobile Insurance Act. They're going to get training on stress. They're going to get training on all the things the police get training on, and they do not need it. But it doesn't matter because the Act says they have to have it. In order for me to train all our special constables, that's going to be the equivalent cost of 2 full-time employees to provide them that training 1 year. I don't have a choice. That has to happen. The Act has an entire regulation that spells out what training is required for investigators, what training is required for supervisors. I can't promote certain people to different ranks unless the training required for that rank. Really, really challenging for us. We have increased levels of oversight as a result of this new act, and nobody has a concern with that, other than it does add a tremendous amount of additional cost to the police for the reporting up that goes with that. Cost in terms of time. We know from studies, and these are not my studies, we know that administratively it takes more time after a call for service to look after the paperwork and everything that goes along with it than the actual call for service took. So that's an extra burden to policing. We're not alone. Everybody is feeling the same burden, but I just think it's important that people see this. So we have legislation that drives what we do. We have common law that drives what we do. Locally, we have a strategic plan that drives what we do and what we deliver. Our strategic plan is built on 3 pillars of enhancing community service, modernizing the police service to support and supporting our people. Because if we don't support our people, we don't have anything, and that's important. And this is all geared towards helping us to increase trust and confidence in policing here in our city. So I won't go over and belabor what those pillars involve, other than to say that there are 6 goals in our enhancing community service, 19 initiatives and 22 key performance indicators. If you wish to see what those all are, please go to our website. That strategic plan is available for you there. Under modernizing our police service, as you might expect, some of our techniques and our equipment, we have 3 goals, 10 initiatives, and 11 key performance indicators. And with regard to our people, 5 goals, 10 initiatives, and another 13 key performance indicators. I'm sure that may work or in locations where you have a intranet to communicate information to each other. We do not. Up until recently, we tabulated all of our tickets that we wrote, the speeding tickets that everybody hates but everybody wants. We had to do that by hand. We actually paid a human being to go through the tickets, count them up, see where they were written, how much they were written for, when is the court date, and put all that in an Excel spreadsheet. That's the sort of stuff that we should be using technology to do. So what else are we spending our money on? Well, 80.8% of our net operating budget is spent on salary. That's pretty consistent. It ranges from about there up to about 92, depending on the individual police service. That's an unavoidable cost. My finance manager is here, and I know that I can see her looking at me, and she's going to hold me accountable to these numbers. So, and in fact, she provided me with these. That's an unavoidable cost. That leaves 11.2% over and above. And when 8.5 of that 11% is for materials and supplies, things that are unavoidable. Things we need to put in our cars, the fuel, the oil, the service, the bullets in our gun, right? Because that's part of our training, everything. That's 8.5%. 1.6% for professional services. Those are the contracts that we have to have. Less than 1% goes to training. That is going to be insufficient. That is going to be an insufficient amount of money. And then less than, 0.2% that goes back to the reserves. And that's to save for that rainy day. At a recent town hall in Ward 4, I was asked about the budgeting and how much we spent and how much we budget for things like homicides. And I said, well, how much would you budget for homicide investigation? He said, well, I don't know. I said, no, that's what I have to know. Because it can cost them $500,000. Is that too much money? Not if you're the surviving family members of somebody who was the victim of a homicide. Last year, we wrote 2 warrants to do phone intercepts. That's the listening in on the phone lines to help us solve work. Cost up to $250,000 just to do one of those. That's an expense around policing that I don't think people really appreciate, and you can't predict for that. So where are we? The red line here indicates the average amount spent on policing on a per capita basis for our single tier municipal partners and the people that we compare against. For those at the back of the room, Peterborough is in here at 321 at the low end. At the high end, at $575 per capita is Thunder Bay. Guelph is the next lowest to us, followed by North Bay, Belleville, Brantford, Barrie, and then Sault Ste. Marie. The average is $391 per capita to be spent on policing. We currently spend, as I said, $321. So where do we sit in our city? Well, let's bring it a little local. More locally, what we've done, and by the way, we didn't come up with this data. We took this data from the DMA 2023 municipal study, independent third party. This is verifiable and it's available to you. It's open source data. So what we did is we also looked to our comparators. We looked to see how much they're spending on the various city line items on average, and then how much our city spends on our line items. So we know here for policing, within this city, we spend about 79% of the average on the line items compared to what our single tier municipal comparators spend. At the low end, 41% on parks, 56% on social housing. Now, it moves us through public health, fire, but we get over to ambulance at 105%, planning at 128%, cultural services at 134%, transit at 142%, and general government at 185%, based on the average of our single-tier municipal comparators. So that gives us an idea of where we sit within our own city in relation to compare against our comparators. So what are we doing with the money that we do get? Well, we're seeing an increase in our calls for service in our 911 call center. had 42,923 in 2023. So that's year end of 2023. That's a 2.3% increase over 2022. The no answer 911 calls. So those are somebody calling and they kind of hang up. They don't. Then we have to call back, and there's a time commitment that goes to that. 8,500. That's up 2%. That's why you see some of the social media messaging about just don't hang up if you call, if you have pocket dial, how to turn your phone off so it doesn't do a pocket dial. And then non-emergency calls, the raccoon type call, 118,803. So that's a fairly significant increase in our calls for service. So the total calls generated were 32,407 last year. What we do is we track when it happens and the time of day it happens. So when by month, so for those at the back, January on the left, December on the right, probably not surprising. December is fewer calls, and maybe not surprising, August in the heat of the summer is at the highest number of calls. But we also check when the volume of calls happening during the day so we can try and match our staffing levels to the demand for service. And as we can see here, starting at 8 o'clock, we start to increase, and by about midnight, things start to taper off, and not surprising, like 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, it gets quieter again. So when we can be a little more sophisticated in our data collection, we can be a little more sophisticated in how we deploy our resources and stagger it. But I know everybody wants to know, yeah, but when will you get there? It's a good thing to know when your calls are coming in, so this is when we'll get there. All I've done here is I've plotted out the priority 1 calls. Priority 1 are those life-saving calls. Somebody's life is in danger, right? Help, help, I'm being beaten up, this is what's happening, I need help. It's our highest level of call, lights and sirens, that's what you see us going to. Again, for the back of the room, we had 4,646 of those calls last year. As you can see on the map on the right, that's where they're distributed across the city. They're distributed fairly evenly well across the city. The purple here is Cabin Monaghan, police, and then of course here within the city itself. So from the time you call to the time that call is dispatched, so you've called 911 and we're going to dispatch, it takes approximately 2.8 minutes because we need to gather all that information from you so that we can pass it on to the officers. And from the time the officers get the call to the time they're dispatched, 50th percentile here is 5.1 minutes to get to a 911 call. Keep in mind that not that long ago, Toronto was broadcasting over 20 minutes to get to a 911 call. And we're talking 7.9 minutes. My last police service, London Police, we're talking about days to get to some of these priority 1 calls. Okay? These are important. And where's the workload distribution happening? The reason we gave you maps is because I recognize if I say area 1, area 4, you may not know what that is, so you have those on your seats. And the colors match. So the color in the wheel matches the color on your maps. The red is area 1, and as you can see, area 1 to area 4, they're pretty evenly split. Area 4 and area 2 are going to be our busiest, followed by area 1 downtown, and then area 3. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the calls are happening, and they're happening in a fairly even way. Area 4 bumps right up against the bottom end of area 1. So kind of Wolf Street is the bottom end of that. And it picks up into Lansdowne. So it kind of comes down and it skews into what you might think is a bit of the downtown, but it's just the bottom end of the downtown. And that's where it's picking up a few of those extra calls. And what is it that we're being called to? Well, the vast majority of those calls, I know you're not going to see this, and it's just so you know we actually capture this data. Routine traffic stops and traffic enforcement are the top 2 things that we're constantly dealing with. And I get those calls constantly. We get the emails. The police aren't doing anything about traffic enforcement. The police are never on my street writing tickets. The police are, and I can tell you that's the vast majority of, that's the top, what we're doing is traffic and traffic enforcement. And it is a perennial returning complaint in our strategic planning process every single year. Now, I put red light cams and speed cameras because then the police don't need to be there to write those red light tickets. It's not going to stop people from running them, and it's not going to stop people from getting in collisions. So we can use technology to maybe hold somebody accountable. And then we can put the police involved in other traffic stops because a lot of what we get criminally comes from traffic stops. Now, another good story that we deal with, and this is a non-criminal, is our MCIT, our Mobile Crisis Intervention Teams. Partnered police with a social worker, trained, one's a nurse, the other's a trained mental health worker. They do fantastic work. Last year, these two teams, so 4 people, 2 pairs, 194 of these mental health occurrences where they didn't need a strictly police-related involvement. I want more of those people if I can help it. We all agree that the person with the gun on their hip is not always the best person for that call for service. Sometimes we are, but sometimes, and I would like to think the vast majority of times, we are not. Or we can be there and support the proper people who are there. They made 375 apprehensions last year. An apprehension is different than an arrest. And this is important for you to understand. Because an arrest is, you've been arrested for something criminal, or the Arrest Authority of the Provincial Offences Act, that's your rights to counsel, caution, handcuffs. Sometimes there's handcuffs in mental health apprehensions, but you're not under arrest. It's not a criminal record. It's there to get you treatment. Now consider this. The Mental Health Act allows the police to intervene when somebody is in an acute state of mental health crisis, to get them before medical treatment, because they are a danger to themselves or somebody else. There is a mechanism in place to allow us to intervene and get them help. I can't tell you how many reports I read where we see people who have overdosed 4, 5, 6 times, and we're bringing them back to life with Narcan. They are a danger to themselves. Or they're leaving their needles behind in parks and places and bus shelters where people are afraid and our kids are playing. That is a danger to somebody else. But you know what we don't have? We don't have legislation that says get them to help. The OACP supports that. I support that. We need something to allow us to intervene proactively to get people to help. Because we can't just continue to bring them back to life and suggest that that's okay. So, we're going to move into the criminal occurrences per 100,000. For these next slides, Peterborough is in green. So if you're at the back, you'll see where Peterborough is in green for each of the years. On the left, the grouping is 2019, on the right is 2023, and here we want lower is better. So we want to be lower. The red lines going across the slide is always going to be the color for Canada, and the white lines going across the slide is always going to be the color for Ontario. As you will see, last year here, where we are, we're lower than the national average, still higher than the provincial crimes per 100,000, but we dropped from the year before. That's a positive move. There's lots of work to be done, but we are moving in the right direction for the crimes per 100,000. We're going to go into a little more detail about what those crimes are, but we are moving into the right direction here. Crime Severity Index. Now, I did get a question about this leading up, and I did ask and solicit questions online, and I think I need a minute to explain what Crime Severity Index is, how it's calculated, and what it's based upon. And I apologize if you already know this, but please indulge me because there are some who won't. The Crime Severity Index is measured because each type of crime is assigned a weight that represents the severity of that crime. That number is based on the police reported crimes for a given type of crime, and it's multiplied by the weight. The weight is factored in by how the incarceration rate in relation to that crime, and it's calculated every 5 years. So this is where that weighting comes in, that Crime Severity Index. That data that StatsCan uses comes from the Uniform Crime Reporting Survey. Every police service in this country contributes to the Uniform Crime Reporting Survey, and we have done since 1962. Every police service has the same data extracted from their record management systems on a monthly basis. That data is sent to StatCan, it's cleaned, and where they come up with our uniform crime reporting, so that's where the crime stats come from, and it's then used to help them derive what the crime severity is, based on the types of crimes and how severe they are in terms of where they weight for the incarceration rate. That is consistent across this country. Peterborough is not exempt, we're not unique, we're all the same when it comes to that. And I can promise you that that's the truth. You can go to the Statistics Canada website, you can look for that, and I will tell you that I am the past co-chair of the Police Information and Statistics Committee that represented the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and I partnered with the chief from Community Safety and Crime Prevention with Statistics Canada on this committee. So this is important to know, because Peterborough is ranked number 20 in terms of size of service in this province. There are 43 municipal police services, there's the OPP, and there are 9 independent police, Indigenous police services across this province. The Indigenous police services have yet to determine whether they will opt in or opt out of the Police Act as part of their own governance, but for all intents and purposes, there are 44 municipal and police services if we could include the OPP. Peterborough is ranked 20 in terms of size. So we're pretty much right in the middle of size of police service. We're considered a mid-sized police service. Where we currently rate in our overall crime severity index is number 21 out of those 44 police services. Again, just about the middle. And that's down 5% from the previous year. Our violent crime, actually, we're ranked 15. Now, that's still higher than I want to be. I want to be number 1. I don't know that we're ever going to be number 44. I would like to be a lot lower than 15. But we did come down 1% last year in terms of our crime severity. Keep in mind, we had 4 homicides and they weigh heavily. Our non-violent crime severity, we're 23 out of those 44. We actually came down 7.3%. Now, I'm under no illusion that 100% of crime is reported to the police, but we're no different than any other community. Every community has underreported crime. What we're having to work with is police-reported crime. And so if something happens and it's not reported, it's not counted. And we don't work Facebook pages, we don't monitor social media, we can't take and initiate investigation from those platforms. We need that information to come to us so that we can respond and we can record that. And then the information goes through and it's accurate. Down is good. So where does it look like nationally? So I'm going to go on a journey from the national to the provincial to the local. Nationally, this is what the crime severity looks like dating back to 2006, 2023, and it bottomed out across this country in 2014. That's when we were at our lowest. Life was good. And it's slowly been on an increase since then, probably not to anybody's surprise. Right? So we've seen an increase nationally. Provincially, although the numbers are a little lower, it too has taken approximately the same trajectory. In this city, we've seen a pretty erratic violent crime. So the red, in this case, is our violent crime severity, is our violent crime severity index, is the red. Our green is the non-violent, and blue is the average, is our average total combined crime severity index. What the red tells me is violent crime is hard to predict. What it also told me, because I reached out to Statistics Canada and I said, I need some help. Why did we see such a 2018 to 2021 here in this city? Because I wasn't in this city. I don't know anecdotally what happened. What I do know is, based on the information they were able to provide me, we had more robberies during that period of time. We changed that sexual assaults were classified, so they were also being classified. You'll remember during that, the mid-time here, we had a big investigation around, journalistic investigation around unfounded and sexual assaults and how they were being dealt with. I can tell you that during my time as the chair of the Police Information and Statistics Committee, we created new clearance codes. So the crimes that, instead of making them unfounded, we leave them open. So if we have insufficient evidence to proceed, it's an unspoken crime. There was no way to properly close those prior to that. And so they quite often get closed inappropriately. So there were a host of things. We had more attempted murders during that particular period of time. They're all heavily weighted crimes. The incarceration rate is higher, and that's why we saw such a jump. But what I'd like to point out, and what the story is, I think, for us here locally, is that we've seen for the last 2 years, we're on the decline. It's not great. There's lots to be done. But out of the police services across this province, very few are declining in all 3 categories, which is kind of shocking. And I know it's counter to what most people will feel about their community here in our city, but we're actually on the decline. This is data that I don't make up. So what does that look like? Very messy graph here, I absolutely get that. But just to give you an idea, this just happens to be nationally, provincially, locally, where we rate. And as I said, here's the decline, the decline, the decline is where we are in relation to everything else. And it is counter, I absolutely understand that, but this is the data. what does it look like, again, to our comparators? Because we all want to know, where do we rank? So Peterborough, again, in the green, 2023 on the right, 2019 on the left. Thunder Bay is orange. I only point that out because they're the tall ones. And Ontario, again, white and red is Canada. And here, as we've seen with our violent crime severity index, we've actually been on, with the exception of a little spike here in 2021, on a fairly steady decline. 1%, not enough, but we're making a difference. And the clearance rates I've already seen this year, we are making a difference. And we'll get to some of that later as well. At the high end is Thunder Bay. And for us here, we're higher than we should be because we're comparing against Brantford, Barrie, Kingston, Guelph. And I don't like being higher than those, not at all. So on the criminal occurrences per 100,000, again with green. So what you can see here is, yes, lower is better. We have fewer per 100,000, so that's our crime rate. It's good, but it just means that some of those are more severe because they are weighted more heavily. Right? So then we're going to get to our non-violent, our property crime. This is again where we saw the 7% drop right here. This one went up. So in this case, Kingston, so their property crimes have gone up significantly, and they're up, whereas Thunder Bay is a little lower. We're at number 4. Higher than I'd like to be, absolutely. But again, where we rate based on the crime severity index. What does that look like for crime occurrences per 100,000? Probably what you are feeling, right? This is the crime, it's too much. It's above the national average. And that's why we rated a unit like Community First, because we had to address what is happening in our non-violent crimes. And that's why that unit's in existence, and that's why they're doing such a great job. Lower is better, we're getting lower, and I expect to see that drop again. So clearance rates. This is one where up is good, and we're up. Clearance rates means how many of those crimes are we actually solving? We are up. Again, green here, green here. We are up here compared to previous years, and that's positive for us. And we're well above the national and provincial averages in terms of how we solve those crimes. I'm going to questions at the end. If you have something you want to just mark down, because I'm going to run out of time. So if you just bear with me, please. Angela, do you want to grab a card there? Sure. Okay.
It's just easy to ask a question while the graph's up. But anyway.
All right, if you really want to, go ahead. But go ahead.
I'm just asking you how you chose these particular 5 or 6 cities. Because you could choose one of 44.
No, there are single-tier municipalities that have a police service approximately the same size as ours, and they're the closest in relation to our police service. So if I were to compare against the regional municipality of York, for example, with 9 municipalities within the region, their tax is different, their distribution of crime is different, and so their crime rates and things are not apples to apples.
Right, but your other graph used 9 single tiers, 100,000. Now you're using 5.
This is because the other was based on population of the 30 to 100,000 people, so that was a municipality population size. This is around a policing size, from a policing community perspective. That's why. So for example, you don't see Belleville on here, because Belleville has a population of 50,000 people and they have 90 officers. And we have 161. So they're not even in our ballpark. That's why.
How many officers does Peterborough have?
161. And you're going to get to that slide. That's a spoiler. All right.
It's a good question.
It's coming up. Don't worry. It's coming up. So here's our statistics. This is what we look like now. So now we're going to transition to what have we got year to date to the end of August. So I went to the 31 because I just wanted to give you a full month. So this is the first 8 months of this year, what it looked like. Well, our CAD, so that's our computer-aided dispatch, those are those calls into the call center, they're up by 4%. Our occurrences resulting from that, they're up by 11%. That reason for that is because a call might generate more than one type of criminal occurrence. If it's an impaired arrest, it might be an impaired arrest with a breach of probation. There you have 2 things to deal with, right? Or it might be an impaired arrest with a stolen vehicle. So that's where we see the difference in the types of the numbers. Our charges for Controlled Drugs and Substance Act is 37% up. We're doing a tremendous amount of enforcement or area right now. Our level 1 violations, Two, so those are your violent and to least violent are up. So things are up, and this is what we presented in our Ashburnham ward last week, is crime is up, our crime severity is down. There's a lot more work to do. The calls for service are up. It means there's no shortage of work for the police. So we have had 2,683 occurrences. That's up 11%. 5,100 of those were criminal nature. 5,100. That means that, look at that. That's over 80% of the stuff we deal with is non-criminal in nature. Non-criminal calls for service don't get measured by Statistics Canada. The only thing that gets uploaded through the Uniform Crime Report Survey is crime. There is no police service that gets measured on their non-criminal workload. And we know that over 80% of what we do is non-criminal in nature. And you saw on my core responsibilities slide, that isn't included in the core responsibilities of policing under the Community Safety and Policing Act. So who does it? And as I said in our award, we work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And who are you gonna call? They call the police. Ghostbusters are.
Unity Project.
Maybe, but they're not gonna solve all of this. We know that we've laid 38% more charges this year already. That's how I know our clearance rates are going up. But, and this is no surprise to you, I'm sure, theft underage are up 66%. Possession of property obtained by crime, 43% increase. That's no surprise to you. That's why a unit like Community First exists. And failing to comply with breach of probation, up 58%. We don't control when people get let out of jail. We don't know what they do when they are out on probation or they're out on bail. We get stuck with having to enforce it. And we put them in jail, and quite often they're back out that same. You know it, I know it. We continue to do what we do every single day because we're committed to doing to keep our community safe. But we can't control that. And it is driving a significant amount of work. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story, because the stories are always good. Just last week, I see in a morning summary that we arrested a person, so it comes in as non-criminal, but as it turns out, he had an ankle bracelet on. That ankle bracelet, because he was out on custody, he was out of custody, but he was being monitored by an ankle bracelet, so that we knew where he was at all times. The batteries had been dead for 2 weeks. Now, that person came to us that night when he got let out of the South Detention Center in Toronto. And he was sent here. And he had a note in his pocket when we arrested him and searched him into arrest and booked him into our cells. Because when we found out who he did come from Toronto. He was wanted on a couple of sexual assaults and a few other types of crimes, including some breach. And the note in his pocket said, when you to Trinity Church, call the ankle monitoring company. That was in his pocket when we arrested him, we searched him. That doesn't happen often. In fact, very rarely do I hear about those types of things happening, but that does happen from time to time. That certainly happened with this person. We gave him a trip back to Toronto, and he lives there now. So, I'm going to take you into a pretty busy 3 slides. So you see that our property, I'm going to come back to you here shortly. I really got to run through this. I got to get to you after. Okay, so I'm going to take you through some crime and what an investigation looks like into a break and enter. A break and enter, probably one of the most invasive, personal types of crimes that can happen when your home is broken into, your business is broken. I absolutely get it. These slides are the flow chart. They're created out west. I did not create these slides, but they're an accurate depiction of what an investigation into a break and enter looks like. Hold on. This is where it starts. It starts here at the top when a call for service comes in or it's in progress. We either get to the scene, we dispatch. For those who can see at the front, it says Air 1. Like I said, this was created out west. We would deploy our RPAS, our remotely piloted aircraft system. If a helicopter, we deploy a helicopter. This police service did. They dispatch and they set up a perimeter if there's still somebody in there so they can work on catching that individual. On the scene, we work on whether the suspect's present or not present, and it takes us down a path. If they're present and they're here, they're arrested, and of course, all their charter rights kick in. At the far right, we begin the scene investigation. Now, the scene investigation, unlike what happened to TV, involves all of this. photographs of the scene, point of entry, victims interviewed. We look for damage, statements if there is. As you know, we've got a cam safe program where we ask people for video. If they have video, please let us know, because that helps us with our video canvases. If there is forensic identification or identification for us to gather, we'll engage that as well. And at the end of all of that, we go back to the detachment. So again, out west detachment, here it's the police station. And that takes us to what we do when we get to the police station. Now, I told you it takes us a long time to put on police reports and all the paperwork that goes along with that. So the detachment takes us here. If we don't have an offender, well, we do all of these things. And if we do, then we do all of these things. And we get the arrest. If they're going to go to in this case, they report to a crown, but it takes them into proceedings of court. So we do all of that for a break and enter. And that's pretty consistent with every type of crime. There have been 193, just a minute, ma'am, I gotta get to you at the end because we're gonna run out of time. So, but ma'am, you gotta let me get through this. Yep, then you're gonna be here till 10 o'clock, so I've gotta let you carry on.
Chief, I respect who you are and what you're representing in our community. I live in this neighborhood, just so you know, I live in this neighborhood. I'm not gonna ask a question right now, but what I'm saying, what I wanna say is I think you're looking for three things right now. I think you're looking for a pat on the back for what the officers have tried to do in Peterborough. I think that you are looking for sympathy for what you don't have, and I think you also are trying to suggest how much more of a budget the police force needs, and I can respect all of that.
You're right about the last one.
But I do believe
Absolutely.
that the people of this whole community, 81,000 people in this city, need to have better services, better listening on
Agreed.
both the municipal government, and I'm really grateful that Jeff.
We don't have one.
Yep, absolutely.
And also.
Okay, I'm gonna move on here, but please,
responses to our
come and,
concerns,
I would ask you to come and see me afterwards,
responses to
okay?
our concerns.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do what I want to get through here because, to your point, I am going to get to the money slides. And if I don't get through this, I'm not going to get you to that.
You've lost
Okay.
people, and I
That's
know
okay.
you don't care, but you're
That's
gonna lose
okay.
people.
So we've had 193 break and enters in this city so far this year. This is where those break and enters have taken place across this city. Now, you might think, how many have been in the downtown core? Because I hear that a lot. Believe it or not, our downtown core has had 25 break and enters so far this year, to the end of August. Area 2's had 48. Area 3 has had 61. Area 4 has had 46. This is where these have been reported break and enters across the city. How many go to court? How many go to trial? I don't expect you to be able to read this slide, but what I can tell you, and again, this is all sourced, this comes from the Ontario Court of Justice website, if you want to have a look. For break and enters, the total trial rate for the break and enters, based on the number of crimes that go there, 3.5% go to trial for break and enters. So when I said 193, and I showed you these three slides, 3.5% of those actually go to trial. So
So are you suggesting we need to be in touch with the prosecutor's office?
I would love that.
So
To our courts.
That's because
We
we
need our
charge
courts.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like,
We
because you have to follow.
need our courts to be on board with us. Okay? These aren't gonna solve it all.
So if you're not investigating properly.
The police aren't gonna solve all the trouble, but we are going to get them to the court. So the question was how many officers? We have 161 officers in this organization. 134 are fully deployable. That means they go out on the road, use the force equipment, and they can respond to absolute emergencies. We have another additional of those officers who are on maternity leave. Some are on modified duties, but they come to work every single day. And one of the questions I had here, and I thank you whoever wrote that one, was what are we going to do to get the 15 plus back who are on paid sick leave? We have 8 police officers who are on PTSD. That's 4.97% of our workforce. Our sworn workforce is on PTSD. That is less than half the average in this province. The average of police officers on PTSD in this province is about 10 to 12%. We're at 4.9% and we have 1 civilian. I can tell you what our officers see and do every day. Most people don't do that. And we're not complaining, because that's what we do, but it can take a toll. And this is where our members are. And we have 90 full-time and 9 part-time civilian members, with 85 of those who are fully deployable, frontline full-time members. We are well above. And we are at our maximum authorized strength. We are authorized to have 161 officers. We have 161 officers. We are 100% maxed out. That's thanks to the support of the board, because they allow us to be able to backfill some of those officers who are off on PTSD. They authorized me to go up by 8 in order to get to that, so that they can serve the community. That's a good number for us. That means 95% of our workforce is coming to work every single day, as you would expect them to. I'm going to get to the questions at the end, because I can't get to them now, or we're really going to run out of time. It's already 7:30.
Nobody wants to hear the presentation, they want to hear.
That's okay. We'll get to it.
It's
We're
not
going
okay.
No, that's why we're here.
So, there we go. This is our org chart, because people ask me all the time, where are the police officers? Here's where they are, folks. This is where your police are. Does anybody in this room know how many police are on the street at night or during the day? Uniformed police officers. I can tell you how many. Out of those, we have 11 officers in the front line during the day. One of those is paid for by Lakefield, one is paid for by Calvin Monaghan, one is on the front desk when people come in there.
I'm sorry to say something. You're talking about officers with PTSD. I'm a correctional officer with PTSD. I was found out there's a gap in governance affecting not only the police but also the correctional division. A Ministry of Labor specialist was assigned to my work site because we had standing orders, and those standing orders need to be turned to regulation instead of policy. The police force also suffers from the same thing. I found at our Peterborough police, some of them don't even have the basic health and safety awareness training, which is mandatory to have under the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act. That's why you say COVID-19 is a political issue. It's not a political issue, it's an actual hazard. The
Well,
Children's Health Defense, the
appreciate
National
that.
Assistance
So I
Inquiry
do
have
appreciate it.
identified these
And I
injections
have some-
as gene
ma'am,
therapy,
I have some
biological
folks- I have some
weapons,
folks from our
weapons
HR
that are
department
being
here
deployed on the
who can help
population.
you,
We have
okay?
5G
Yes,
take
yes,
chemtrails.
yes,
They're an actual hazard.
Sit down.
I'm ready to sit down, but I have to say that. because
We're not going down conspiracy
They're
theory.
blocking people like myself from getting any help. I'll sit down now.
Thank you. I do appreciate that, and if we're missing in some training, I would like to hear what we're missing so that we can ensure our members are receiving
Intimate
the
partner
appropriate
violence, we
training.
haven't heard anything about that.
So,
Intimate partner violence.
intimate partner violence, I
Oh,
have
it
all
was
that
in the
data
chart.
too. I
Where
have the
is
data,
it?
I have the
Where is
data.
it?
So, let me continue on here if I can, because you need to know where how many officers do we have per 100,000? This we are right here, right? Because
No, we
when I ask for
don't.
more money,
Exists
you're
a
going to
declared
need to know why,
epidemic of
what we
intimate
have.
partner
Someone's
violence
been
in
grabbed 4 times for mental health assessment because we question these measures. We don't have mental health issues.
I'm
Guys,
gonna
you
ask
want
you to
to
have to
be
leave
reading
if you
inside the
can't stop.
injection? Who's got a mental health issue? The one that can read the injections or the one that can't? All of you said no one wants to come grab me again, don't you, sir? No. Why don't you investigate Josh Lyon? You too much force with me at Pizza Hut. Investigate it. No, I'm not talking to you guys. Do your job. No. You guys need to be respectful. Look at the injections. It's a weapon.
We're not going
My
down
daughter is
conspiracy
and needs
lane.
help. I will be, but don't follow me out. I don't need you coming to my and grabbing me again. And the next time, Keith and Real, you say you're going to get a hold of somebody, call them. Don't touch me, please. Do not counselors. Answer your phone. Community members, you have phone numbers blocked.
Sir, with all due respect, I know what you're trying to do with the slide deck. You're giving us your evidence-based decision-making.
Correct.
You're giving us the data and all of that. But what I'm hearing from the room
Yep.
is that people want to ask very specific questions.
If
How is
if I can get through, if I can get through here. I'm gonna ask for a lot of money, and I think you would want to know what I'm doing.
Give us one
And let's not forget about the second police station.
This is the money. You wanna know where the money
Let's talk
is?
budget.
This is the money. There we go. There are two parts to our budget, capital and operating. Capital is the equipment, the training, the facilities, that sort of thing. This is what's going into the budget next year, and I think it's important. We need technology. We need equipment. People are asking me for body cameras. I am asking for some money for body worn cameras. We need to get a pilot project on body worn cameras. We absolutely have to have them. I told you that the new police act is telling us the TAC team, there are new requirements. They need specific related equipment. There are firearms specific related. We are trying to renew our fleet. When we do, we try and do so with hybrid vehicles when we can. So this is what we're looking for from a capital perspective. This is where we currently sit in terms of the net budget as a percentage of the city budget based on their draft budget books, because we don't have the final budgets, but this is where we are. This is where we are looking what we ended up with in 2024. We're catching up to a decade ago in terms of our percent of the city's budget. These are the unavoidable costs. This is what's costing us the things we cannot avoid. This is the cost that is going to contribute to a 7.69% increase without adding a single person to help us respond to come to this. This is included in everything. And I'm glad you actually asked me for overtime, because we actually, it's not listed here. This is part of the salary increasing. Right? And the reason for that is we fill the front line with overtime. Every single day, we put out a call asking for people to work overtime to put police officers on the front line. That's an absolutely legitimate question, and I thank you for asking that.
So if we're fully staffed, why is that?
Because we're under complement. We need more people. We need more people. That's why.
So is healthcare, but they're not getting that.
So I'm here to talk about the police budget. So right now we have scenarios, and we provide them in this way. The gold standard to the bronze standard, and the dollar cost per 100,000 of assessed value. We know that the gold, which would give us 8 additional people, is a 1.61% impact on the all-inclusive tax rate of the city. That means 2 more mental health workers to partner with police officers so they can engage. That means the training staff, which is required by the new police act, a new tactical person by the new police act, an investigator, because as you know, we already have a tremendous amount of work, and this is why we're not getting to you as quickly as you'd like. We need 2 more communicators and ICT. Our communicators are stretched, and as you saw, their workload is increasing. Now the next is what we call the silver, the middle of the road, and again, we prioritize mental health workers because we do believe that there's a community expectation, and that is a smart investment in our community because I believe it's what the community wants, it's what we want. And we dropped off the IT and the extra investigator, and that is an impact of 1.44%, and the bronze is 1.18, and what we've got down to is the training staff and the 2 communicators. I will have to fill those other spots, which means I will be pulling officers from other locations to fill those spots, and that's why we keep having those things like overtime, because if I need to put more mental health officers on the road, then it means I have to pull them from somewhere else. And I want more mental health on the road because I do believe that's who should be answering those calls. Now, thank you for letting me get through that.
Statistics on intimate partner violence.
Those, let me get to here. So intimate partner violence as a call is not in and of itself a crime reported to the Uniform Crime Report, because an intimate partner violence call for service could include crime, or it might not. And what it is it could be anything, as you will know.
Violence
it could be,
is in the word. There's
it
a
would
crime
be,
there.
it could be a threat, it could be a harassment, it could be harassing a phone
Both
call.
threats.
Those are all
Absolutely,
crimes.
but the call type, if you ask me what's the number of domestic or intimate partner violence calls, I can give you that. But there is no
why did you release
there
it?
is no criminal code charge for that, right? So what I'll get you to here, domestic disturbance, that's how it's just listed in our computer-aided dispatch.
Well, that needs to be changed.
Okay, I can control that, I can control that, but that's what it's called. As you can see, year to date, we've had 804 of those calls.
You haven't
Year
spoken about
to
this since City
Okay.
Council declared it.
This has
Sir,
actually
you
gone
haven't
down.
spoken about
This
since
has
City
gone
Council
down.
declared an
In the
epidemic.
same period
Is
of
that
time.
not an issue? You
But I
have
mean-
not spoken about an epidemic of intimate partner violence in your city as the chief. One of your officers was just arrested in relation to intimate partner violence. Not release his name. He's on paid administrative duty, so he still has access to victims' information.
So what I'm going to say is we're not going to jump to conclusions about their gender, whether it's a male or a female.
Okay,
And that's a bias that we quite often do.
That's the least important part of
It's
what I
not.
said. That's the least important part of what I said.
What I've got here, Just because I want to provide you the data, you've asked me for the data.
Why
We've got
haven't you had a press
804.
conference? I
We've
know
had
what the data is.
804 so far
I
this
know what the
year.
data is because I'm a victim. I know, so you
838
don't need to tell
during the
me.
same period of time last year. During
Sir, why haven't you
2023,
had a press
we
conference
had
to speak about this epidemic?
1,457. Ma'am, I have all kinds of crimes, and I would
It's
be
an
more than
epidemic.
happy to
It's
tell
an
you
epidemic
all.
declared by
I
city
get it.
council.
Yeah, but you don't
Where you
have
get your
crimes that
budget
impact
from.
53% of your city's population,
So,
sir.
This is
One
where
of your
we're looking
officers
at here.
was arrested
okay?
for that.
So what I would like at this point, sir, you have a question in the back.
Thank you.
Yep.
We're moving on real fast from intimate partner violence, real fast.
Yes, sir.
I just think it's just my sense of humor, but I just enjoy where this meeting is taking place tonight. You're looking for how many millions of dollars next year? An increase.
Right.
How many?
Well, it depends on what they're prepared to provide us. 2.5 at the low,
Yeah,
3 million at the middle,
yes.
and 3.4 at the high end.
Oh, thank you. So if we don't do the pickleball, you get your raise.
If you go back 30 slides ago, we were also the lowest in expenditure for recreation in this city of the comparators. Just leave you with that.
I know we've got Rodney on you, but, yep, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Chief Betts, I've worked for many years with a lot of police officers, and I've had very positive interactions. And I thank the officers for their service.
Thank you.
Having said that, I have deep concerns about the budget in this city. Don't forget that not only I've never seen anything before where the police service asks for a raise of a percentage, and council, not all of them, but the council said, sure. And the raise, frankly, 15.3% was, in my mind, exorbitant, unacceptable. It increased it by $4.65 million. And the council said, sure, we'll give it to you. So you got every damn dollar you wanted last year. And not only that, but you also got $60 million for a new police station. So I would say respectfully that if you need cameras and these bits and these $3 million, then take $3 million off your $58.6 million budget for the new station and cut back on the new office equipment, whatever else is happening there, and finance it through that, because the impact on taxes was 2.33%. And I can afford it, but there's a lot of people in this community, and many women in particular, who can't afford this. So you're gonna have to go back to reality with the greatest respect.
I appreciate that.
And you know that, as, I'm just gonna read something quickly, because you know that, in fact, it's clear, that, police, our review of studies, so in Canada,
Okay.
you know that the more money does not lead to less crime. The majority of policing costs are paid from municipal taxes and have risen faster than expenditure on transit or social services. The cost of policing at the municipal level varies from, and so on. It says much of the rhetoric for justifying increasing police budgets is about crime. An analysis of trends over the last 20 years in Canada could not find any correlation between increases in municipal police budgets and a reduction in crime rates. And they said that it was much better in Canada, the US, and the UK, that shows that investment in programs tackling risk factors gives better returns than
I don't disagree with you whatsoever.
Don't disagree,
I
okay.
don't disagree that
So
we should
we'll
invest in a social safety net. I can't agree on taking the money from the capital budget because it's a different budget and a different type of budget, and
No,
that's
but
how
you-
it's financed.
But you
It's
have to
financed
understand,
differently.
you have been
Okay?
given
Yes.
Cadillac financing,
I
and you've been here
appreciate
for
what
a
the
year.
city support.
Okay, the taxpayers have
Yes,
done.
and I appreciate your support.
Okay, and
What I
so,
can't do is I can't compromise on public safety.
no,
and my
but
job is
but
public
you're not
safety.
listening to what I just
I
read there.
did,
They
I
have
did,
found that
absolutely.
throwing money at the police does not help.
Yes,
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you,
Okay.
the property crimes that you have, the unit,
Yes.
there's 4 officers.
correct,
Are they full-time on that?
of course, yes.
So they're $150,000 per officer,
With salary and benefits, yes,
so that's
And equipment.
$600,000.
yes.
plus the sergeant?
The staff sergeant oversees many units.
Okay, so let's add another 50. So, well, no, just for their part-time costs. Or are they overseeing the whole?
They're overseeing
Full-time?
many officers. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're spending over $600,000 to recover $31,000 in stolen property.
I agree.
That doesn't seem to be a very effective use of police.
Which I can appreciate if you're not the victim of one of those crimes.
Well, I have been.
So, and I had that
but
question
I-
actually last week from somebody who said, is that a good return on investment? And I would say to you,
Well, it's
if
not.
you're the victim of a crime, do you want us to investigate? And if you don't want us to investigate, I can stop doing that. We can stop
You
investigating.
don't
Just that, you don't have to have a unit
I do,
of 4
because
officers.
they don't have officers, like I was trying to tell you how many officers we have on the road. We have 8 officers on the road during the day for the city of, I think somebody said it was 83,000 people in this city. That is 8 officers who are in uniform on the front line answering 911 calls for service. That's 2 per ward. That is it.
Okay.
And
So-
when a partner violence call comes in, 2 officers go to that and a supervisor, and that's 3 of the 8.
Okay, Chief
That's a lie.
Betts, Chief
Only
Betts, let me
two
get
show
this straight. What's your
Anytime.
gold increase? What's the increase you're asking for this year? Last year was 53%. What are you asking for
This
this
is
year?
9.8.
What?
9.8 is this.
9.8%. So
And
you
this
want a
is-
10%
this is
increase
8.8.
on top of the 15.3 you got last year. In 2 years, you've been here for a year, so
Correct.
you want 15, 25 point, well,
Actually,
the
what I
city
want is public
taxpayers
safety.
afford, oh, come on, the
We're
city.
not any
What I
safer.
want is public safety. That's what I want. I
Sir,
get nothing, we
we
get
don't
nothing
feel
out
safer
of
with the
it.
15% you got last year.
Our crime has gone down, and I'm sorry that you don't feel safer, and that's why I want suggestions. If you can tell me how I can make you safer, we would like to do that.
I'd love to. Would you take our questions?
That's where I've asked for some to come, because I'm not gonna get to them all tonight. But if we can have them written down, because there's a whole host of hands behind us, if we can get to some of those, then I can have some of these that we can have some response to. So. yeah. Okay. I know Rodney had his hand up first here, so we're gonna go back to Rodney. Go ahead, Rodney.
Hey, Stu, how come the regular calls and the 911, whatever, how come they are being recorded? And when you're in the South Montague area, I forget what areas you cover, but when you call 911 or whatever, doesn't OPP take that area call and then transfer over?
No. So when you call 911 in this city, it comes to the Peterborough Police Service, and that line is recorded. If you're on the 115, depending on when your cell tower picks it up, bounce to us, it may go to the OPP, but because the OPP polices the Highway 115, and then off to the Highway 7, it would go to the OPP.
Okay, now like I said earlier, when you record these,
Yeah.
the calls, the regular calls or not versus prices, whatever.
Right.
What is the purpose of those being recorded? Is that for the community or no? Because I don't know if that's a breach of.
That helps us with evidence, and it helps us to be able to make sure that we're responding appropriately, and we do quality control on that to make sure we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And we do quite often go back to that and to those recordings to make sure that we haven't missed anything. So thanks for that, Rodney. I appreciate you guys. Perfect. I have some other questions here on the back. I'll come to you guys up front. Go ahead.
Easy one. You created the new police act. You created it in legislation.
So that act actually started under the former provincial government. It was approved under that formal government, then it was repealed, and then the new act was into the current provincial government. And it was rolled out on April 1st of this year. There are things that still need to be done to address some of the pressures on local communities related to this. Every chief of police is feeling that in this province. Yeah.
I would love to see more police officers on bicycles and all
Yeah.
our laneways, and you can travel so far. Like
Yeah.
from here to Lakeville, and I'm not in good shape. Like they could be up and down, there's 2 of them. They could be across back and forth downtown, all over the place. It's a deterrent, right?
And we do quite often put our officers out on bicycles. The challenge we have with that is if they arrest somebody, somebody's gotta come and get the person. So that sometimes is a challenge, but quite often, you're absolutely right. We try and get our officers out on bicycles and on foot, quite frankly, as much as possible. And they're quite often in the downtown core, that's the primary space where they are walking and riding. So, but the bicycles are ideal for releasing in the parks and getting around to some of those locations. So I do thank you for that, and we will continue so. If they're in that fluorescent green, that means that's the type of officer that they are. Okay, I know, sir, I'll come back to you here, sir, there's a question, you were just to the right over there. Yep, go ahead, with the hat, yep, yes, sir.
It is here, nice to meet you again. Just a quick question for you there, Steve, my name is Police Services. By the way, you're very well spoken, sir. Perhaps more of our community speaking would be a better way of approaching this next time. You say you want more money for your budget, but yet you tell us your hands are tied by Section 5060, you can't arrest them.
No, we can arrest, they're just not gonna prosecute.
Right. But just to confirm, your job is to arrest, right?
Correct.
Not to prosecute?
Yep.
So by you not arresting, are you not, in essence, not doing your job?
No, in fact, so Bill C-5, which came out 2 years ago, I believe now, is actually a directive that says, and it directs the police shall consider all other options before they charge under Section 4(1) of the Controlled Drugs and Substance Act. And so what they actually want these to do is divert people away as much as possible from the courts and do that rather than arresting for those Section 4(1), which is the simple possession charges.
But it doesn't say we don't.
Possession, they're driving away from the scene, being a police officer, you feel apply some sort of law such as impaired, I don't know, public intoxication, if we're walking down the street.
Isn't possession under commitment to crime?
So,
There's many things as a police officer and avenues you have to us before you just say, hey, we're not gonna do nothing, that's what your officers have said. You want more money, I think it's time that you maybe project to the people out here that you're actually gonna benefit from this money and do what you're meant to do.
yep, and we do put in for that, and I appreciate seeing you again, and we do try and divert those people, and I know what your particular interest is specifically right now around the drugs, totally get that, and I appreciate that, and I see what you like, so thank you for that. But I do have to put and look at what are my most types of crimes, and where do people need us to be? And those are those crimes where we have to put that resource towards. Those are the people crimes. Now, I just had a question up front here, you had a question, did you?
I do.
Go ahead.
So we're talking about pressing crime and visiting crime.
Correct.
I don't know if you remember me.
You do look familiar.
I'm the one that came to last year's budget meeting. I was swarmed 3 days before
Okay.
in my driveway. I was told it wasn't an emergency by 911
Right.
when I was getting, we looked into it, you said the 911 was great.
Right.
So
Okay.
not a problem or whatever.
Don't
I asked to
recall
press
that.
charges.
Okay. Yes.
I was diverted
Okay.
from 911
Mm.
to non-emergency.
Okay.
They didn't answer, so then I called back
Right.
911 and I was diverted again.
Okay.
By this time, my car was surrounded.
Okay.
I got my niece in though. She was held out. Do you know where we live?
I believe I know where you live.
Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'd rather it not be out there for everybody.
I agree. Fair enough.
One of the women,
Yep.
still walking around, I was asked if I could wait there for the day
Okay. Yeah.
with no help until someone could get to me. Well, my niece was in the home
Right.
and I was held outside while someone was screaming at me that they're gonna stab me in the neck and this was their neighborhood now.
Yeah, I know exactly
I
where you're
asked-
talking about
yeah.
and what you're talking.
The photographs and I
Yeah.
asked to press charges.
Right.
Woman's still walking around down my street.
Right. And I don't know.
I
and
even stopped by the police station.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while I was on my way there,
Right.
a man OD'd while riding his bike, and I treated him on the lawn
Okay.
with Narcan.
Right. Yeah.
I came in,
Yeah.
I asked the beautiful young woman at the counter
Okay.
to take my name, let them
Right.
know I'd like to speak to the officer whose name I won't say.
Okay.
I have still to this day not heard anything back.
Then
So I would
that's
like to
totally
know
inappropriate. So what I would
What
like
I
to do
would-
is have
what-
somebody
what
get in
you
touch
are
with you.
doing
on
and
that,
the
okay?
police
Yeah.
station, the police officers are doing
Yeah.
to work with our council.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, no matter how much anybody wants to ignore it,
Mhm.
a large, probably most of the crime
Yep.
right now
Okay.
has a lot to do
Mhm.
with policy that's implemented municipally.
So we do.
Now,
work
address
through-
crime
Yes.
has to do with policy
Yeah.
at the provincial and the federal level,
Right.
and the ability to do so.
Right.
But the majority of crime, especially in the downtown core,
Mhm. Mhm.
is fallout
Mhm.
from failed policy that
Right.
is being continued.
Okay.
There's an amazing example of that today, and I could give you 3 this week.
Yeah.
I understand how overwhelmed and why our local authorities are. That's not something that you're going to not hear from me.
Right.
I appreciate how overwhelmed you are.
Yeah.
There are things wrong in every aspect of every city all over this country.
Right. Yep.
I
agree.
understand that.
Okay.
But my problem is that I would like to see
Yep.
the police
Mhm.
defend the people of the city
Mhm.
with counsel. So what is being done
Right.
in between both.
Yep.
Because the weight on authorities to protect the people of the city, their homes,
Yes.
their property, their children, their businesses, coming out of these policies, yet they're being exaggerated more, they're being enlarged more, and they're receiving more funding.
Yep. And we feel it. I absolutely. And
So
what I
where
want
are
to
the
do, if I
talks?
can bring you back to.
Where's the moderation
right?
between the legal
we do
system
talk.
and politics?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. We're stuck
And
in the middle.
there
Right.
isn't anything. Our
You're-
council
Yep.
sent
So
us here
we do
this
have-
evening.
We do have some other questions, but what I would like to do, if you're willing, because I don't like to hear that you haven't heard from anybody, can I have somebody grab
Nobody
names?
hears from anybody.
But what I would
They're
like to
sending
do,
us to you.
what I would like to do is I'd like to have my deputy chief get your name so that he can reach out to you.
This
and
is
we
what
can
you
follow
said
up
to
on
me
that.
last year, and I gave
He's
that,
sitting
and I've
here.
never heard from anyone.
He's sitting here, and I will ask my deputy.
Never.
So, but this is where I'm giving you that
My
commitment.
sister, my
I'm giving you
mother,
that
my
commitment
neighbors,
right now.
we've all
Okay?
given you this information, and we've never
I
heard
don't
from
have
any
it
of you.
personally. I don't have it personally. So the deputy chief who oversees our operations is going to, if you're willing to provide him with that, so that he can follow up. Thanks.
There's a young lady in the black.
In the black?
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm not going to be a complete dick about this, but I did have a couple questions about some of the facts you did put up.
Okay,
One of which, you were comparing the cities. How can you compare them if you're not taking into account sample size? Every single one of those cities have a different sample size than we have here, and you can't compare the budget
So
of them
it's-
when they have to have a bigger population.
so that's smoothed out by StatCan. We did not create those graphs. We physically created the graphs in Excel, but we did not create the data that went into those graphs. So in terms of that, that is smoothed out through StatCan and through what they do there for the Community Center of Justice
Okay,
Safety
well,
Statistics.
criminal occurrences as well, you were comparing them to a whole bunch of other cities, but you can't compare their population size. Population vary, although.
Absolutely.
it is-
Socioeconomic status too. Absolutely. Yep.
So you're saying it's all Stats Canada on that one?
Those are Stats Canada, that data is coming directly from StatCan, yes. And that came out of the Crime Severity Index and the UCR data that they produce every year. Publicly accessible, I would absolutely invite you to go and see that. That is where we get it from. Now, it's also important to recognize that we're looking at city stats versus CMA, right? So it sounds like you'll know a little bit of what that is. So for the benefit of everybody else, often when you get data, they call it CMA versus city. CMA is the municipalities and it's the county and it's everything around us. That includes the Peterborough County, that includes areas that OPP police. And what we do is we get just the city of Peterborough. And we compare the cities against cities, not the CMA. So that's important. If you go to StatCan and look at that, please filter for that.
Okay, well, I will also say as well, first off, why do we need such a big TAC team?
Because the ministry requires that in order to have a tactical team. It's not us that creates that. That's them. That's a ministry standard, and you can have a look at that too in the Community Safety and Policing Act. I don't create that. I just have to live with it.
Does that mean we have to fund them as much as the rest of the places that actually need more funding?
They have the same amount of training, the same amount of capabilities, and the same equipment. Yes.
And then on top of all that.
Last one, because I've got other questions coming up here too.
Yeah, I just want to bring that
Yeah.
actually to what they were saying.
Yeah.
So are we not going to address the fact actually about the officer who did, and it's not even an assumption, who actually did assault their partner?
We don't know that it was an assault, and I'm not going to speak to a particular criminal matter that's before the courts. So I'm going to leave it at that. It's not it's an investigation conducted by another police
Sir,
organization.
I was arrested within 2 hours of me calling 911. What investigation was that?
Excuse me, I don't know, ma'am. There's some other people with questions. With
Yeah.
who? Go ahead, Sandra.
Standing up.
Sorry, I'm going to ask you to stand up, ma'am, so I can hear.
You talk about safety.
Yes.
And that public safety is important to you.
Right.
I wholeheartedly do not agree with that statement. I feel that's just words, it's not action. My son was beaten almost to death 3 weeks ago tomorrow. An officer showed up at my house to tell me that he was being transported to Sunnybrook Hospital.
Yes.
I asked him questions, what happened, he didn't even care. He acted like he couldn't give two flying fucks.
Yeah.
I know your case, and I know that you've spoken with my deputy chief about this particular case. He's the one who actually spoke to you on the phone about this, and you guys have connected, and I know that particular certain. Oh, was it Inspector? Oh, it was Inspector Elliott. Sorry, my inspector in charge of investigations is the one who actually spoke with you. She's here as well.
My question is.
Yes, what's your question?
So that happened on Friday. On the
Correct.
Tuesday, I called your station because
Yes.
my son was still in Toronto.
Yes,
And I said, okay, I have a name and a location.
Right.
I'm worried about timing because he can't get you and talk to you, so could you start an investigation? He made me feel stupid.
I understand
Because my
that.
son, I'm not done talking.
Yep.
Because my son is an adult and I shouldn't have been calling on his behalf.
Mhm.
I felt no help anywhere in the city, to the point where I just blasted my dirty laundry online. And then an officer calls me.
Yep.
Why does it take that to get the proper things done for the money they want?
So there's two reasons for that. It was not handled properly. I know. First off, it was not properly, and for that I apologize. It was not handled properly. Secondly, you got the first phone call, but my senior leadership team here knows because we were sitting around the table when I saw your post online, because like you said, you put it out there. Ask them, what has happened here? How has this fallen between the cracks? Somebody needs to reach out to this woman. And that's where that call came from. So that is of importance to me, and I feel, and I am very sorry that you did not get a
Who's held
response.
accountable for that? Someone went on to get hurt again by the same person. Who's held accountable?
Right?
Second person.
Yeah,
And you
I
talk
know.
about-
So no answer, just right, yeah.
Honestly, I can't tell you that anything would have happened that night. All I can tell you is we did handle that call properly.
And who's held accountable for that?
You talk
And
about
that's what we're working on
PTSD,
now
what
for the
about the
officers.
PTSD
We
that
really
you
love to know,
face?
because the answer's gonna be nobody.
Nobody's held accountable.
That's what we're getting to the bottom of, to be honest with you. We're getting to the bottom of that right now. Because I don't have all answers yet. All I know is that my priority was to make sure that you were looked after and that somebody was able to get in touch with your son. That's priority number one.
That's what you put in the human complaint, that you treated me with the utmost respect.
Okay? So that's,
What does
I
that mean?
apologize to you, ma'am, that happened, and I know that you've spoken with Inspector Elliott, and I know that you've spoken with Sergeant or Detective Bell on that.
I had
And,
to speak with Elliot just about.
okay, so then Elliott's her boss, and I can tell you that she's been directing this behind the scenes to make that this is getting looked after and
I'm
rectified.
grateful to her.
So, I do thank you for bringing that up, and I'm thankful that you actually put that out there, and I actually saw it, because I was able to make an immediate action to
But
happen.
what would happen if I didn't put it out there?
I would never have known, so I'm glad that you did.
That's the problem.
Thank you.
Huge problem.
You're going to tell me who they are. Can you?
I don't know. Gentleman with the hat, can you stand up? Oh. Brandon, actually, do you mind?
We're gonna
Because
give
you
somebody
did
else
ask
an
a question.
opportunity.
of-
Yeah, so I will. Yep, go ahead. Yep, sir, you, go ahead.
Hi there. I just kind of following up with a few people that made statements, and you kind of answered that things have fallen behind, like between the cracks for multiple cases, examples here. Like, one of the stats that I was a bit worried about hearing was like the break and enters. You kind of spoke that like 25 break and enters downtown was a great number to be low. But I think the realities are that there's a huge number of unreported break and enters that, and cause that have kind of led to that is that when people have made those calls in previous instances, they don't get treated properly, and then there aren't reports made. So like, that's actually more of a worrying number to me than a good number. Like 25 break and enters in the downtown, I know personally of probably close to that number, like that going around in the year that they're saying, like,
So what I need is,
I'd be worried that that's a really low number.
I need people to report it, and I don't disagree with underreporting. I
Well,
don't disagree.
what's your strategy to tackle that, sir?
You're
Because you
messaging
have a
that
role
out.
to play in the underreporting of crime.
We message that out.
What is it
That
gonna
is
be
what,
like when everything's
like this
reported?
is messaging out. Because when people are telling us that the crime stats don't match their experience, I need people to step up and report it. I can, listen, if I don't know, I can't go, right? We don't know, we can't get there. So.
But
I
that's a
just-
question of public confidence, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And I need people to report crime. And crime is underreported across this country. We know it is.
Why don't you work with the community like E5? They would tell you
Go
that.
ahead,
It's an
ma'am.
issue of transparency and communication at all levels with the municipality.
Chief, that's,
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you taking these questions.
Yep. sorry, I can't hear, sorry, say that again?
And they're entitled to service and protection.
Correct, yes.
Okay. You have indicated that the removal of policy,
Yes.
a public concern of a restricted substance
Yes.
is an issue.
Correct.
I would point out that it's a sort of an arbitrary issue, that if your poison is beer or liquor, you can drink that openly on a patio in front of children, in front of anyone you want.
Yep.
No problem.
Yep.
If your happens to be a narcotic, suddenly it's an issue.
Okay.
It's dangerous.
But that's the law. I don't make that law.
Yeah, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that that's an arbitrary starting place. And those who are drinking and whatever have car keys in their pockets. So,
Yep.
you know,
And they'd be arrested if they were drunk driving. Well, but they're doing a lot of patrol.
Is there a question there, ma'am? Because I do have somebody else who has a question.
Yes.
Yes.
You have indicated that when you say move along, that there are safe places for people to go.
I send them to the CTS, yes.
My understanding from the Ontario Health Team is that that service is only open from 6 a.m. till 2 p.m.
Okay?
And it only is licensed to deal with intravenous.
Correct. Injectables, yes.
Injectables, yes. So, people who are not using that, or if it's 2 p.m., are the bugs. So I wouldn't want you to represent to people here that they have some safe alternative to go to. And I would also state that the Ontario Superior Court,
Okay, this is going to be the last one, because I do have other people who want to ask questions.
I've waited patiently.
But please, ma'am, I do have others who need to ask questions too, so please. Yes. Do you have a question?
Yes, I would like you to consider your policy about indicating that move along is serving community safety. These people are no threat to anybody. You have not mentioned that you are visiting confiscating civilians. So to take it that most of the time they're not involved. And this is a perceived threat as opposed to an actual threat. And the Superior Court of Justice has in fact ruled that people who are consuming or have consumed are not to be presumed to be a threat to anyone else.
So the question is, will I reconsider the Safer Public Spaces Initiative? Is that your question?
If that's how you're applying it, yes.
Then my answer is no.
It sounds to me that though if you move anybody along after
That is
2 now, you're just pushing the problem down somewhere else on the street because they have nowhere to go.
What I'm saying is, I don't want people consuming those stuff in our playgrounds, our parks, our bus stops, our bus shelters, and our business storefronts. There is a community that needs to be able to continue to access and to be able to carry on their safety and enjoyment of those places. What I am not doing is I am not arresting those folks who I could, and we have somebody in the back with a hat on who would ask me about arresting those very folks. So I understand your pleas. And that's the tension on a subject like this. So I take a compassionate approach to say we're not going to arrest you and criminalize you for an addiction, but we are going to have to move you along. And I can tell you, every single person that my officers deal with are absolutely yes sir, yes ma'am, and they move along. Those who are actually the ones doing it, they are very compliant with the officers, and my officers are very compassionate.
Because I'm not a danger to anybody.
So then they don't want to have their drugs seized. So thank you for that. That is my answer, because I am absolutely having to continue with that. I appreciate your perspective on it. I appreciate the information you've provided me, but my commitment is to the greater community on this, and I'll just be very clear. I'm keeping that program. Thank you. Go ahead. You had a question, ma'am.
First, I'd like to say I've been here for years. Secondly, I'd like to say I'm a retired educator. I'd like to say I was a student at Prince of Wales School, and I loved element, safety element, and the safety patrol, and being a safety patrol officer, and I believed in justice back then, and I still believe in justice now. As a public school teacher, I love grade 6 values, influences, and peers directed at grade 6 students, so they understood all elements of the law are based on age, severity of crimes, guilty by association, all those things. But my point is, when we see crime and problems in our community, usually I lay it at the foot of poverty.
Okay.
And 20 years ago, 1995, those OW rates were cut 21.3%, since we're into percentages.
Yes.
They have never been reinstated.
Okay.
They have never matched the cost of living.
Okay.
And we have people who are living in dire poverty. That causes stress.
Okay.
We also have the 2018 Rob Ford, where he changed the rules for rent increases.
I'm going to ask
And
you
it
the
was
question.
25. Now I'm getting to my question.
Okay.
2018 rents
Okay.
through at 2.5 a year
Yes.
time since 2018. So people are facing financial difficulties. We need to counter poverty. We need to raise the rates from Mike Harris and Rob Ford. And I assume fewer people will have mental issues and will have to do, there will be fewer petty crimes, in my opinion. There will be fewer drug-related problems, but we need to address the poverty. Now, what are the police doing to stop the people at the top of the drug business? I know there's a lot of things happening at the street level,
Great question.
but what about the people,
At the top.
the organized crimes
Absolutely.
in the community?
Great question. Thank you for that. Because that's absolutely who we are trying to go after. So today we arrested the 2 people who were bringing the majority of the drugs into the Trinity Community Center. That's in the newspaper today. We put out our media release. Okay? That is, we have 3 more people who will be putting warrants for their arrest who were dealing drugs within that community center, preying on the people who have addictions who are using it.
Organized crime.
They are all connected to organized crime, and we feed that in. So the investigation does stop there. It does continue, and at some point, it passes outside of the jurisdiction of the Peterborough Police Service, and we do engage our partners. We are active partners with and the RCMP to help engage and to go after those higher levels. So your observations on that are absolutely correct. We do need to disrupt and dismantle organized crime. We're going to do what we can within our jurisdiction to try and make that safe as possible. And today's an example of that, because I heard loud and clear about what was happening around that location. We've been dealing with that and have made several arrests, and I can promise you this, every time that we arrest a dealer with drugs, we find guns. Because violence goes hand in hand with the drug dealers at that level.
What are we doing
And
to
that is
address the
something.
I
policy
did
that's on
mention justice, and I want justice
So I'm just gonna,
not just
I
across
absolutely, we agree,
class levels.
we agree. But I do have a question here. Where is it?
Just quick.
Yes.
Would you be willing to do a meeting that's based on solutions? Like, we talk a lot because we're all upset, we're all angry. But at the end of the day, if you or we don't come up with solutions that you guys are willing to do, we don't get any further ahead. So would you do that? Would you do a meeting that's solutions
You know,
based from people's
absolutely,
ideas?
absolutely. And in fact, I know that the various councilors are working on town hall presentations. I'd love to be part of those conversations.
We don't want more presentations.
That was voted down when we're sent here.
So, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Yes.
What is the best way to stop our friends from getting broken into? What would you recommend we do?
So the question is, what would you do the best way to stop our homes from getting broken into? A really complex question in terms of how do you target harden. There's a whole theory around crime prevention through environmental design. What I would like to suggest to you is that if you have specific concerns about how can I make my place safer so somebody doesn't break in, please take advantage of a free service that we offer. We use auxiliaries. Those are people that don't cost a thing. They are volunteers, but they work for us. And they will come out and do an assessment of your property and provide you with suggestions on what you might do to make your residents less likely to be a victim of that type of crime. We don't follow up. We don't check to see whether or not you've implemented them. They will just provide you with suggestions. It won't cost you a thing, and you can request that through the website, through our police website. Okay? Yes, you're welcome. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say that.
Hold on. We got, sorry, somebody up front, then I'll come to you.
So why is the Peterborough Police Services continually protecting the idea of criminals? When that information shared may spread their community awareness about safety issues and who people are. What's the justification on withholding these people's identities, whereas other municipalities openly share that information?
So a big portion of why we don't provide those names is there has been some work done around this, around privacy, and the fact that these folks are alleged to have committed a crime until they're convicted of a particular crime. There is opportunities when I and only the chief can authorize the release of their identity, and that is if I believe that they pose a risk to the public safety. Today, the 2 higher level drug dealers that we arrested, their ID provided because I do believe they pose a risk to the community by the activities that they're engaged in, where they're engaging in. They are preying on marginalized people who are addicted and have an affliction, and I believe that is a continuing and ongoing threat to our community, because there is no doubt in my mind they will be released from custody, and we need to be able to be aware of that. That is where that comes from, and it's in statute. Again, it's just in the law. So now, Shirley had a question up front here. Thank you.
No, I just want to make a statement. I just think that and people just sit back and complaining and whining about everything. We have got an awesome police force here in town and everywhere else. They're doing the best they can. It's like to hear what people are saying if we don't have a police force at all. Looking out for us.
Thank you. All right. Hold on one sec. I know I have a spotter who's been in line first. Go ahead.
Thank you for this.
Yes.
But it's not just you.
Right.
Our community is helping you guys.
Yes.
But what's the mayor and the rest is doing to help stopping buses full of people who are not from here, but come here, have no home, have problem with mental issues, but what are we doing so it doesn't cost us our money? Our taxes are going up crazy every year, and nothing is changing. So what are you guys doing to help us, so we don't have people from other places and cities to solve the problem here?
So that's a city question, not a police question?
It's, the police is supposed to help us with the crime that we have here.
Correct.
But the city, is it helping and working with you to stop those buses that come here from other cities?
I will say that the city has shown us tremendous support. They're the ones who helped to fund
We
us
are not seeing
with
it.
last year with that increase, and that has been a tremendous support to
But
us.
we're not seeing it.
I can tell you our crime has gone down and our crime rates have gone down.
The number that you're showing me show they're down.
Yes.
But I'm sure that everybody
So,
here,
I do
we're
have-
not seeing they're coming down. They're
I do have some
actually
questions.
coming up on our Facebook.
And you and I spoke after the last town board, and I will happily see you again.
Perfect.
Okay? But I do want to get to some questions, because I did ask some folks, sir, I'll come back to you. Brandon, I'll come back to you, but I do have some questions here that people asked, and they took the right, and I did solicit that. First question I have is around street racing overnight. There's a very specific location given, summers and weekends, and what are we going to do about that? So, one of the areas that we've had to move officers from is our traffic unit in order to put them on the front line. Traffic's everybody's responsibility, but we do have a dedicated unit of officers, 4 officers and a sergeant, who do traffic enforcement. What I would ask is if you have a specific concern about a very specific, and I will keep this card and pass this, you won't have to make that phone call, you won't have to make that correspondence, is that they will then add that, and they will put that on an area where they will target, and they will have stepped up enforcement to try and address that. If you want specific times, or you want to provide us with that, then you can certainly report that online to us with details, and they will be a little more targeted in how and when they conduct that enforcement. So I will keep this for whoever wrote this, and with the specification that you've provided, and I'll make sure that gets to the traffic sergeant so that they can direct the resources accordingly. So thank you for that. I have another question here that came back. What's the best way to protect our properties? I don't know if this is related to the other question that I had with regard to break and enters. So door cameras and other things prevent crime or deter crime. So cameras, in and of themselves, of course, is a visual deterrent, but it's not gonna stop somebody from that crime. But what it might do is provide evidence of who did commit it. I have them on my house. I absolutely understand they are not going to stop somebody from committing a crime. But if they exist, then they give us that leg up to help us crime. We implemented a program here called CamSafe. It's a program where we ask people, if you have crime cameras, just register and say, hey, by the way, if you have a crime in my neighborhood, I have a camera and we may catch something on that video that might assist you with your investigation. It doesn't cost anything. We're not tapping into your cameras. It's just, I have a camera at 123 Anywhere Street, and it will help the investigators to respond to that a little more quickly. Another question here was given to me is, how do we know of 6 houses broken into on Honorworth Park area last month? What more can the police do to step further resources to do so? Do you need more? Well, I'm gonna say, if we have more, we can do more, right? You know I would say that, and this is where I would go. Last year, City Council gave us more, and we've done more. So, with regard to target hardening, I did provide some information with regard to SEPTED and Home Guard. Home Guard is the home-specific one, SEPTED is around businesses. So, sir, I know you've had your hand up for quite a while. I'll come back to you again there. For whatever your question is, Rodney, you're next. Go ahead, sir. Back. Yep.
This is a clarification question for me. You put up a graph
Yep.
showing 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 crime rate going up.
Okay.
You showed 22, 23 crime going down. Is that correct?
Let me get to that graph because it may not be, but I know you're at the back of the room there. So let's just have a look here. You tell me when you see the graph.
It was just a line graph.
A line, oh, that's the crime severity index. Okay, go ahead.
And then you said crime rate was going, no, that's not it. That's not it. It was, you said you just came here and you saw the line that's going up and then coming down.
That's our crime index.
Keep going, you said, I don't know.
I know.
The CSI graph.
Keep going this way?
Yep, keep going.
Keep going back.
Sorry, folks, you're going through a quick backtrack here. No.
Oh, well.
The one that's spiked and
The one that
cold.
showed last
Yeah,
year.
it's the one that's here, it's a circle at the end.
Oh, the circle, yeah, okay, we were on that.
That-
Okay, that one? Yes?
Back one.
Back one.
Back one.
Okay.
That one's fine.
That one?
No, that's not it. When you came here, that's it, yeah.
Okay.
That showed crime rate down, correct?
The last 2 years, the crime rate has, the crime severity has dropped here in the city of Peterborough.
Okay, and then
Yes.
you showed a table from January 1st to August 31st of this year.
Correct.
Showing 20%, 40%, 60% increase.
Of certain crimes.
So I don't understand why certain crimes are going skyrocketing, but yet crime rate's going down. It doesn't make much sense to me.
So, okay, so I'm glad you said. So this is crime severity index. So this is the weighting on the crimes, not the volume of crimes.
So that doesn't mean the crime rate's going down.
Correct. We do know that the crime rate has gone down when we look at the number of crimes per 100,000. It has gone down. What I'm saying is our calls for service the workload has gone up, and our ability to solve those crimes has gone up. So we're having a clearance rate for those crimes.
Okay, so when I saw that 50%, 60%.
Right. Right, okay, I think I know what you're, so they're apples and oranges in this case.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Okay, thank you.
My mind was, I knew I found it there somewhere.
You found it, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Rodney first, go ahead. And I'll come.
The question's already been answered, but I just been asked about the 911, but the crisis matter, if somebody's calling and says, I need help, blah, 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 what would they do? And there are lots of questions about the call, so I've already got the answer from.
Okay.
My best buddy. Thanks.
Fantastic, thanks for looking after that. Sir?
I was just wondering, how many charges have you guys, police laid, and how is the conviction rate?
Well, we can't control what happens.
Because I've been to court cases, and I see a lot more cases being dropped.
Yep.
And overcharging. So that was supposed to be in its favor, to say, hey, crime's coming down, or do
No,
those
so-
charges that get dropped calculated to your stats?
So the charges, once they're in front of the courts, the police have nothing further to do with them. Other than we're the witness, obviously, or we're the investigator, but what happens to them in the court is not within the purview of the police. Our job is to catch you, get you to the court, and then we hand it off to the judicial system, and they deal with it from there. We have no control of what they do.
I understand that, but do you
Right?
know what the commission rate is?
I don't have that with me right now. It'll be based on individual crimes, and it's something we could probably dig out of the Ontario Court of Justice, but because I'm looking here right now at workload versus that part of it, and we do meet regularly with our Crown Attorney to have those discussions around, okay, what can we do better, where are we not doing so well, and quite frankly, how can we increase conviction rates? So they're under their own pressures as well, and sometimes they'll quite often triage what they can. It's equally frustrating for us to put a case before the courts to have it withdrawn. It really is. I'll come back to you in a second, ma'am. I have somebody up front here. I just want to try to get to people who haven't asked a question yet first. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm wondering about, I think you mentioned, real ballpark, you said that about 80% of calls that police get are not criminal.
Right.
So is there, that says to me that there's an opportunity, there's obviously a big gap in our community of services that people need that are not finding from other areas. Either they don't exist in the community or they don't know where to go for those resources. And I would imagine having the police deal with those is a lot more expensive than having civilians deal with them if those civilians exist.
Right.
So I guess my question is there opportunity or is there work being done for the city to cooperate with the municipality to identify those areas and maybe guide the budget discussion for things other than the police budget? Where are the opportunities we can get a really good return out of municipal spending to take the load?
So I can tell you, and that's a great question, how do we divert the money to the front end, right, to the prevention piece, or rather than having the expensive police have to deal
Or
with
just completely non-criminal, right? Completely non-criminal things, like the raccoon.
The raccoon. I can tell you, as the police, we would love to see that. There's not a chief of police who has said, we're protecting of our budgets because we want to do that work. We don't want to do that work. We absolutely support it, and we support the principles of it. And that this is not unique to the city of Peterborough. The crime versus crime workload, that is everything. And that is indicative of what the social safety net looks like and the investment in social services. The challenge we have, of course, and the challenge we'll see here in our community, is that in order to build up the front end, you can't just let go of the back end because nobody's going to fill that gap in the meantime, right? So I would wholeheartedly support building the front end, and then we don't need to continue to fund at the same level the officers to do the work that the front end would be taken care of. I'm also acutely aware of the fact that there's probably a dearth of people to do the type of that needs to be done at the front end. And so there's a building of capacity at that as well. And I think we're absolutely in agreement. Every chief of police I know would love not to go to those raccoon calls. If we could divert those things upstream rather than bring it to us, it would be much to everybody's benefit. Completely agree. So
next my question is there like open communication about that between you and the police department and the city when it comes time to determine these services?
A lot of those types of services are provincially funded. Right. And so we're federally funded, right? And this is sort of the opposition that we find, or the tension between who pays for policing and who pays for everything else, right? Municipal tax is paying for policing, but all those social services and the majority of that is coming provincially and federally. Right. So if the funding isn't at that level to support the municipality, who's left holding the bag to pay for public safety? The municipalities. So there's an absolute need to look at how funding is done. There's a finance committee with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police that have looked at that for quite some time and says we need to change and turn the model on its head. Somebody mentioned the UK earlier. That is how they fund. That's federally, because they recognize that it should be. Enforce the criminal code. The criminal code is federal legislation. Why is it not being paid for at the federal level? Right? So great questions, very good sort of ethical approaches to how to deal with things, but could have tangible results if somebody would find to make that happen. I do have a couple questions here that have just come to me. Right? Oh, is that right?
Those are his questions.
Those are your questions? All right, go ahead. If you would like to say your questions rather than me read them out, by all means.
Yes, I can do that, Chief. That's, I'd like to compliment you on your increase under pressure here, answering the questions. The two questions I wrote in the file cards, go down to a solution for this situation that we're all finding ourselves in. We're a rock in a hard place. Costs are going up, taxes, we have the march of expenses. That's Chief, that's to my first question. And from his police officer, leave that one on, is that your third day one?
but I'll get you the one I think you want is crime rates, right?
If you look at crime rate, you go back to Thunder Bay there, see that, I lived in Thunder Bay for 30 years.
Yep.
And those bars you see for Thunder Bay are representative of a police force within the last 2 or 3 years that's disintegrated.
Yes,
A very large police force, but they didn't do their job and the province asked them to be completely dismissed. We need to show, in my opinion, confidence in our police forces and the actual costs that they have to endure. They have no apparent strategic reserve for their officers. They have a complement of 161. Now, I'm talking against here of the mayor and an alderperson. Basically, council has to ensure that the community backs up its police force, or you're going to have what you see here in this graph with Thunder Bay. That's what's at stake here. In terms of what our situation is, what the solution might be, as mentioned in several presentations to council over the past 5 years, this city needs prosperity so that its average income moves out of way below where all the rest of Canada, Ontario is. And to me, the solution to that, what I'm asking Chief Best to comment on for this police work with his officers, is what are the systemic factors here? To me, the big systemic factor is don't have enough industrial or commercial land to actually provide thousands of more jobs for this city. I'm still holding on to CGE plant with 5,000 people there, Gila Bell, Westbrook, goes on and on.
Okay.
How are we going to have commercial, industrial, and don't forget the Johnson Motors, Captain Stanley.
So I do appreciate the question. So, so I do appreciate the question, and I can tell you, so the handling of municipal affairs and employment land, that's going to be out of my realm of expertise. I can tell you that it is a conversation that we have, and it's like, why come to Peterborough? At a municipal level, why come to Peterborough? When I talk about police officers, because that's where is why come to Peterborough? Policing is paid, the salaries are paid almost identical across this province. Doesn't matter where you are, salaries are almost identical. So why would you want to police in Peterborough? What brings you to Peterborough? I think we have a pretty great community. I've worked in 2 other communities. I've been involved with other policing across the province and across this country. I can tell you, I know it's not ideal, but it could be a lot worse. And you've pointed out quite back about what happened in Thunder Bay. I get that. And I don't want to get there. I want to stop that as quickly as we can. We live on the border of cottage country. Who wouldn't want to work and live here, is what I say, right? So to your point, that's a better question for city council, that's a better question. But do know that we are engaged and we do have those conversations about what can we do together, collectively, but that's outside of my realm of expertise or my ability or sphere of influence in terms of direct making change.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Sandra, who's next? Sandra, who's next?
Actually, I think it could be Anne.
Anne? Go ahead, Anne.
Yes, thank you, Chief. I have a comment and a question about gender-based violence. We've glossed over it. I thank Councillor Chica for bringing a motion to council to declare it an epidemic. It is an epidemic. And I have dealt with this issue in my group for almost 40 years. Unfortunately, lost a client who was murdered by her husband many years ago. I don't want to ever see it happen again. Femicide possibility if domestic violence is not appropriately dealt with by the local police force. Over the years, overall, there's been very good response. I've had many, many clients have a positive. But in recent times, I've been highly disappointed by the process and the lack of, I would say, resources given to this. And quite frankly, it's shocking to me that we've got 4 officers full-time as before dealing with property crimes for $31,000, and there aren't the resources for gender-based violence. And I know this because clients and a friend have dealt with it recently. So first, I would suggest strongly that there has to be much more education. This is 2024, And the officers that I've had dealt with clients, very concerning comments in the way they dealt with it. As I said, women are at a great risk when they're leaving their spouses, and so I'm concerned about education, what, if anything, you're doing about that, and also, how about reallocating some of those, maybe all 4 of them, maybe 4 of those officers from property crimes to gender-based violence, because there are not the resources. I can tell that from the cases I've seen dealt with.
So thank you for that question. So the education is ongoing. I can tell you that because it's mandated. We don't have an option. It's a provincial mandated standard, so that does happen. And I can tell you, it is actually.
Sir, actually, in my human rights complaint, you said nothing about that. There was nothing. There was just talk about policy.
Right? So there is mandated education, and you know this, Ann. You know that there's mandated requirements and mandated.
Of course, but
and the adequacy is LE 24, and the regulation that's just most recently come out provides us with what that is. On top of that, every one of our
you
officers.
should want to educate them, and the ones I've dealt with have not been educated.
Let me answer.
Go ahead.
Every officer, every single one of my officers is expected to be able to respond competently to an incident of intimate
Right,
partner
but they're
violence.
not doing it.
They're not.
And that is something, that feedback, okay, we have a domestic violence coordinator, you know who that is.
Right.
Quite soon. That's the information I need. Her boss is currently sitting back here, that's Inspector Elliott. If you have specific concerns, I would ask you, please bring that forward, because if we don't, what your concerns are, we can't address that.
Can she raise her hand so we know who she is?
So.
But the concerns are also the people that are not being, you've got 4 officers on property crimes, and you have 1 officer full-time on domestic violence.
Every
And
officer.
that's not acceptable.
Every officer responds to domestic
But they're
violence.
not dealing with it appropriately, so I've had clients have their lives risked because of the way their response was dealt with.
And that is
Their
something we
risk
need
is
to know.
dealt with.
So I would ask you, please pass that, and please speak to Inspector Elliott.
But there's
so that we can have
confidential
that conversation.
issues as
Can
well.
she,
So please
can
let us
Inspector
know
Elliott identify
that.
who they are? Are they in the room with us today?
Yes, Inspector Elliott is the only female inspector we've got, she's right here.
Thank you.
I'll
Thank you for
certainly follow
identifying
up with
yourself.
her.
Yeah, 'cause I know you
But
know
what
that.
about the resources? Because that's important. They need more people, frontline, to deal with it, because that was the problem. The frontline officers didn't know how to deal with it appropriately, and it put my person at risk.
I don't know about your specific case, but I do know in general, every officer is trained and expected to respond to those calls for service. Okay, and then when we have it significant, we actually have our entire investigative services team that can be pulled to help with those.
I don't want it to get, I don't want to femicide the
Nor
city
do
of
I,
Peterborough.
nor do I. So please, I would ask if you can, Ann, and I know you know who Inspector Elliott is, I'm
Yes.
sure. Hey, please make those connections if you have some specific concerns, and we can address that. Next. Who's next?
I think unless there's a card that you want, and we're actually, we're just a bit past time, so.
Okay, I have time for question then. Go ahead.
Sure, because mine are the cards that you didn't get to anyway, so I'll take
Well,
my turn now.
Fair enough, go for it.
What is the City of Peterborough Police Service doing to tackle human trafficking in this community and these stark and, very blatant activities that are going on? If I can see it, and I'm not trained in it, then you guys must be seeing it all the time. So I'd like to know what's the approach, what impact are you having? Because I don't want to just be told, we gotta go to the prosecutor and complain, we gotta go to the Solicitor General and complain about Community Safety and Policing Act, we gotta go to this person and complain about the budgets or this. I want to know what you're doing right now for human trafficking.
We have officers who are permanently assigned to just investigating human trafficking. We're part of a provincial team that addresses human trafficking, and we have a provincial team member who's part of a crime analyst who provides information and helps to provide and steer the direct around our human trafficking investigations, not just locally, but in our surrounding areas. So we are investing resources, so I do thank you for that. I can tell you this, that those investigators, that analyst, they're paid for by the province. We don't have that money locally. So that is, they're called seconded members, and that's paid for through a provincial grant.
But what impact are they having? I guess, so it's nice to know the resources are there.
Yep.
But I like to always see the results of the action. So what is the impact that they're having?
I don't have the exact stats with me right now. They are having an impact, whether having the impact that we would like them to see and the ultimate success, but they are having success. They are having impact, and they are doing coordinated and absolutely structured responses. I just couldn't tell you what the conviction rate is going to be on that, and I just don't know specifically about the number of calls that they've responded to.
Maybe for your next presentation, you could work it into one of the charts.
Noted, thank you.
Yes, and
Absolutely.
gender-based violence.
Is that it?
That would be it.
Oh, Brandon's got one more.
Brandon's
Let's get
got-
Brandon. Brandon, you got one more. Go ahead. But you gotta be quick though, Brandon, because we're over
I
time.
promise you that, sir.
All right.
Quite interesting here. Just want to ask you, sir, here, that when you do call 911, your operators are quite contract with people calling into your service.
Okay.
A lot of us are in distress when we call you, and to be condescending to the people that are calling in is very unprofessional.
Or yell at them.
Secondly, the accountability side of things, just two things I want to touch on. One, did you ever follow up with whoever released this person? You know what they're talking, saying about the ankle bracelet? Or was that just slipped by?
Not slip by. We have followed up with that. Yes.
And operator that answered this lady's phone call, was that ever addressed when they, like, did you listen to any of his phone calls?
Yeah, we just actually listened to that. We just had the recording on that. My deputy chief himself listened to that phone call. So thank you.
Through this. And my last part is this, when you guys have these calls for service to these.
Sorry, I missed the last piece there. When you have these calls for service. Oh, overdose. Yes. Yes.
I stated at our last meeting that we spoke at, that an officer is required to attend the scene when this happens, correct?
We're required to attend all sudden deaths.
Not overdose.
Correct, because not every overdose results in a death.
Okay, I just want to clarify that because
Correct.
it just seems like a lot of our resources, ambulance services, park cleanups, police calls to crime to drugs, the follow-up. I mean, we got police officers saying, "Oh, I'll follow up on that tomorrow." I got all day on watching before I can understand what I'm saying. Well, if we have all day, then why does this take so long to get caught up on the crime?
So they work all day, but they are busy working all day. So they'll fit that in. Like when I came here today, there were 40 calls waiting to be responded to at 6 p.m. today. There are 8 officers on the road for 40 calls.
So
It's
it'll
going
dip
to
down
take
at
some
2
time.
a.m. so don't
Exactly.
worry.
You saw the graph. There you go. Yes.
Just hang in there, get to
There you
2
go.
a.m.
Are we done?
We're done.
Okay, sorry folks, we're gonna call this a wrap. Please, if you do have more, please do send it in. You saw the email address that I sent out, it's the police office at peterborough.ca. We will look at those emails. If you have solutions, please provide them. I am happy to action that. Thank you.